So Korea, being where it is in the world of tea growing regions, let's talk a little bit about where Korea's tea growing regions are. So this growing up as a little girl, one of the things we of course hear about Korea being the hermit kingdom at one point, Korea being the land of morning calm. But one of my favorite was if you were to take a look at Korea, the entire peninsula, both north and south together, it looks like a little side view of a bunny hopping. And so you have the half part, the lower half of the bunny, which is the South Korea. Most articles, most books will say Korea has three growing regions. And it's perfectly correct to say that. But I believe that would be too simplified. Although it is a small growing region, although the yield is not as large as some government officials or tea growers would like, and there are just physical limitations for that. But three regions, if you think of it as provinces, certainly you have the Jeollanam-do, Gyeongsang-namdo, and Jeju-do. Jeju-do, anything with the word with the do at the end, it also means an island. It's both an island and the province. So three provinces, but to say that there are only three growing regions, I think would be a misleading statement. For as small of a tea growing region as it is, the history and the topography going from just one section, for example, in Haenam, which is hit with a lot of often harsh ocean. It's a beautiful place, and a place that I often call one of my second homes in Korea. But a lot of ocean breezes and strong winds, which makes the leaf itself quite different than, for example, the leaf just perhaps now with all these spider web of highways in South Korea, roadways, just a 45 to 50-minute hop over to Posong tea fields. But you'll find that the Haenam leaves and Posong leaves are quite different. And while people don't talk about things like Gangjin area or Janghung as much, it is so embedded with Korean tea history that to omit those regions would be, in my mind, a big mistake. Certainly, when we talk about commercial tea growing regions, without question, Posong-gun in Jeollanam-do, Hadong-gun, of course, and then Jeju-do would be without question the growing regions of most import because of the amount of hectares that are planted with tea and for commercial growing factories. Certainly, for example, Jeju-do, Osolok has three of the four of their large true tea plantations, one of the few tea farms in Korea that would be considered a plantation size. And Osolok has four, three of them being in Jeju-do. And Posong, of course, has Daean-daewon, and then and nearby Yeongam area also has the fourth one of Osolok. But so again, three growing regions, three provinces, at least four, although I think it's quite a bit more. So there are more, and these are no in particular order, but some of the names that you might keep in mind when it comes to where does tea grow in Korea? Posong, Hadong, Jeju-do, certainly. Gangjin, Jirisan, of course, the foothills. When we talk about Darjeeling being at the foothills of the Himalayas, Hadong is really at the foothills of Jirisan or Mount Jiri. And Jinhae, which is a little bit further south and east, closer to well, actually straight down from Hadong. Hwasun, I mentioned Haenam already. Yeongam, Suncheon, Damyang, all these areas. Kaesangni is actually part of Posong, for example. It's literally a hop over. In fact, the next exit over on the highway from the main tea roads of Posong. But you hop on over there, and again, the climate, topography, quite different at times of what the tea fields that are facing the ocean side versus those that are in Kasangni. And so plucking yields, plucking time of the year, all differs. So next time you hear Korea doesn't have a lot of tea, well, the yield is not nearly as much because Korea climatically is a little bit too cold. It's just a little bit too north, and it's just a bit too cold to have the kind of large commercial yield. But like the lovely small vineyards we all love to go finding those special gems, Korea has beautiful gems of tiny little tea farms that you will find perhaps a one little 15 kilogram roller by hand, and where they're making hand hand processed artisanal teas still from beginning to end. Although that is becoming even um, more of a rarity even in Korea as well. So now that we've talked about the regions, let me show you some photos. This is a field of Jeju-do. So here, the bottom photo is one of the tea plantations of Osolok in Seogwipo area of Jeju-do. And the one above that is very large. You don't often see in Korea tea bushes that are so high and tall. But that's very reminiscent of if you were to go to tea fields in Hawaii. Something about the volcanic soils. Just tea bushes love it. They grow tall and fast. And you look at these tea bushes and you think, gosh, 10, 15 years old? And you find maybe it's 4 or 5 years old. And then the picture on the right is representative of many tea fields in Jeju-do, on Jeju-do, I should say, that decades ago were citrus farms. But and citrus, as most people who have ever heard of Jeju-do might know, is Jeju-do is famous for all of their halabongs, their tangerines, oranges, all their citrus fruits are wonderful and rather expensive as well. But it is citrus farms that Jeju-do was famous for. But some years ago, with the tea renaissance in Korea, and because of an issue some of the farms were having, a number of the citrus farmers uprooted their entire soil system and turned the soil around and turned it into tea farms. And this would be one of them. And this is an elderly couple who they do phenomenal work, but one of the most charming things is the husband, while they were digging up and turning the soils over, they would find, of course, this being Jeju Island, a volcanic island, would find all these little rocks, little stones, I should say, of varying sizes. So just to get it out of the way, he began to stack them and create tapsas, rock pagodas. So if you go there, there are thousands of pebbles and rocks that he unearthed while he was turning the soil to turn it into a tea field. And it's now an artwork that adorns both sides of this long driveway that goes into the tea farm. And actually that's his wife. And one of the things that's wonderful about travel anywhere, but tea travel, I think those of you who are here journeying with me today, you're here because you love tea and you want to know more about tea. And one of the things you probably, if not, will very soon find out is that by and large, tea folks are welcoming. Tea folks are really some of the nicest people around. And often you travel, you start the day and you have no idea how the day may end when you start knocking on doors of tea farmers and tea folks that you have never met. And such was the case with this elderly couple. I had driven over, I had taken the car ferry over and was driving from different tea farms to others. And I happened to come across here and fell in love with the little tea farm that they had. And we got talking. Next thing I knew, she's like a mom, said, "You can't go to a restaurant for dinner. And where are you staying for lodging?" And next thing I knew, I was there for a few days, staying right with them in their home. The one on the right, that, as you can see, is a much larger. That is a tea plantation and the factory of one of the Osolok tea factories. And if any of you have a chance to visit Jeju-do, certainly you should visit Osolok. Osolok has one of the 2 tea museums on site. in Jeju-do. Jeju-do has, among the larger tea farms, there are two, Osolok being one, that has, as part of its premise and tours, is a tea museum alongside its shop and cafe. This is when you see this river and you see this sort of rainbow looking a bridge over there. That is when you know you're crossing the river over to Hadong side. And Hadong is traditionally known as Yasengcha, wild tea fields, Mount Jiri, Jirisan, and the waters that come down from the mountain that flows out into the river. In 2003, if you were to have traveled there, you would have seen most of the tea fields would in fact have been up in the hills and the foothills of the mountains. But around 2003, 2004, with the tea renaissance at its peak in Korea, the current tea renaissance, you began to see plots along the river, plots along the roadside being seeded with tea seeds or clonals and being potted with rows and rows of teas. And so certainly Hadong area has beautiful, part wild grown as they are up in the mountains. But, you know, when human beings begin to touch, you have a combination of wild grown tea in Hadong, but you also have cultivated tea bushes. There are no longer any plots, it seems, if you are driving along the roads, along the riverbeds. There are tea fields everywhere, very different than what it looked like in early 2000, but gorgeous. This is on the top. The top photo has a view of Hadong looking down from one of the hilltop tea fields. This is just to show that Korea, as small as it may be, has tea fields in quite different areas. The one on top is a view of Baekhyangsan, or where Naejangsan area is above Damyang. And it wherever there is a temple, there are tea grown. And Songgangsa, as well as Damyang and Hadong area, those are areas where you'll still see wild tea bushes. This is a Posong. Posong, as some of you may know, can be at times similarly very different, but similarly in the context that it is the largest tea growing region at one point, similar to what Shizuoka prefecture was to Japan. Both were responsible for about 40% of the tea production out of their respective countries. And the woman in black, or the girl on the bottom asking for more tea, please, that would be me, right at the entrance to the Tea Plantation Experiential Museum, and where the Posong Tea Museum is. She was moved about 2 years ago, in fact. She was moved 2 years ago because they were doing a lot of construction work, and I'm hoping that she will be brought back. I loved it when they put her up there at the entrance. The one to the right of that is one of the organic tea farms that does a lot of experiential teachings during this comes springtime. You will see not only individuals, but tea clubs and tea schools and busloads coming in to get the full experience of plucking and learning how to create tea from beginning to end. And that is where also Tea Classics Tea and Food Arts Research Center is located as well. And then this is also scenes of tea plantations in Posong. This past winter, it was one of the coldest winters Korea's had. I was told something like the most snow in about 35 years. One of on my bucket list is to be with camera and zoom lens in hand, all set up on a winter snowy day to be able to capture the tea fields as snow covers. But that's rare in Korea. When it does, it often is just a dusting. And so it's been difficult for me to capture. That's the one part of the season that I have not been able to capture yet. And then the plantation on the bottom, on the left, is a hidden gem that's been there for a very long time. But if one didn't know it was there, you would look at the front of it and go to their tea tasting room and thought, okay, well, this is nice. But behind, into the mountains, is one of the largest tea plantations in Posong, and it's quite lovely. And if you are in the good graces of the tea plantation manager, sometimes they'll give you a ride in the back of the truck, and it's an e-ticket ride, as they would say, and you can see the mist covering over the mountains coming in from the ocean in the morning as the sun breaks through, and it simply takes the breath away in every way possible.